Hey, what's up, Toby? We are to episode 24 of the Process Debt Podcast. I don't even know where to go.
Oh,
I mean, we
24.
did. I mean, we got 24. Elon is running amok in the government.
Oh, wait, I thought he was fixing things.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
What I didn't understand is when you hire your politicians that you just bought and paid for to promote your product and your stock goes down, what's that tell you? I don't understand what that message is from the market.
I don't know, man.
But my pay grade, maybe. He's doing a bang up job though of really showing how value is created or not to all of his Tesla shareholders.
It's very interesting stuff. We should probably spend a couple to talk about Doge, because I think the short term, the busyness, there's a lot of value for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the impact, the long-term impact, like how does that play? But let's not talk about that today. We should.
Chris, you're such a tease, man. You're throwing that
I am
for our listeners in Romania.
I know.
Shout out to
They're gonna
now.
I know.
Next session. Okay.
I know they're not going to listen to us. We're not going to have anybody in Romania. No more Romanian listeners. It's terrible.
I do appreciate the folks in Grayson though that stick it out with us.
There you go.
So,
all right.
Hey, so you had an idea.
Yeah, my topic was people have RACIs, right? So responsible, accountable,
consulted and informed.
Consulted and informed.
They have them, but they don't always know what it means.
No,
know your acronym. Yeah,
it is a familiar acronym, and I've seen that people bristle against it. Maybe that's because I bristle against it. I'm not sure.
That can be, yeah. You give out what you want back, and
yeah. It's like, I don't want to be responsible or accountable. But the thought here is like, on the software side, which is where I believe most process debt lives.
Yeah.
Not because the systems are bad, but because the people don't understand what those systems are for.
Yeah.
Like, are we stuck with crappy systems?
Yeah.
Because we don't have a baseline for what those systems are supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I guess a question, this is not your first rodeo.
Well, I've been a service clown for years.
No. Yeah. What's the worst system that you've stepped into?
I'll tell you, it's also probably one of the most popular. Yeah. It's SAP.
Oh,
yeah. I've been involved with a number of, a dozen plus ERP systems. And so there's a whole variety, right? SAP and Oracle are probably the two most common kind of broad base use cases.
Sure.
But the difficulty with these very complex systems is that the configuration requirements is so high. Right? Yeah. And to do meaningful configuration assumes you understand how your process works.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Right. And so you and I have chatted offline at times about they have a core piece of software and it's like financial software, and then they keep adding other crap onto it, and they acquire other companies to keep showing growth. The difficulty is that a client gets a singular idea in their mind that the 3-letter acronym SAP solves everything.
Yeah.
This magical panacea and life will be grand and greener. And they're not going to do it.
Is it like Henry Ford's Model T, where you can get it in any color as long as it's black?
Well, and therein lies the irony, right? I would say well over half the big ERP systems, one of the early conversations is always, it's costly to update when you do more configurations.
Yeah.
There's all this additional testing, and the more you integrate it and really try to make it a lifeblood system in your business, every step along the way, there's more care and maintenance.
Yeah.
Again, over half say, we're just going to keep it vanilla. Well, the reality is, and maybe the title of this podcast is Nobody Likes Vanilla, but the reality is that a vanilla-based system it lacks any of the nuance that so many of our businesses require.
Yeah.
A service business and a product business can use the same software, but they have to have
Yeah.
certain considerations. What about you? What's the worst?
It's interesting. Like I think in my career, I've actually never worked at a company that had SAP.
Wow, you're
I
not
don't know
dead
if that's
yet.
good. I know. I'm getting better, as they would say in Monty Python.
That's right.
I've worked with a lot of really good software that has just been hacked so that it's just not usable.
Yeah.
And so I think the Atlassian suite oftentimes can lend itself to, someone had a bright idea to add a custom field.
Yes.
And, someone else had a bright idea to add a custom field, and 1,000 fields later,
Right.
you're stuck with what's the due date?
Yeah. I'm scrolling. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I think most people don't realize that to add to anything, like any single software, adding is so easy.
Oof.
And oftentimes it's so wrong, and you can almost never take it away.
No.
If you look at our wrists, like our wrist, if you look at our wrists, we have all these bones in our wrists. What are they for? We're not really sure.
That's right.
But they were added. They're really hard to take away.
Yeah. I'm not experimenting with that. I'll take your word for that. But you're right. It does seem like it's easier to add layers. And I think typically when process changes, we do our best to offer some measure of change control, but then we tweak what's in place.
Yep.
And there's a whole host of really good arguments for doing that.
Yeah.
To do a wholesale tear out of a process is expensive and can put your businesses at risk.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, there's probably some elements, maybe it's not an ugly acronym like RACI, but there's some elements that when you bring this up and thinking about how software plays a role in organizational process, what are some of those elements that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's workflow, right?
Yeah.
So you've got Jira Service Management, you've got Zendesk, you've got reporting, which and I delineate between reporting and analysis. Whereas reporting is something that's delivered on a regular basis from a system, it doesn't change.
Yeah.
Whereas analysis is single, one time, and can't be reproduced. However, within business, that is a nuanced thing that most people don't understand. In that, like, an executive asks for something and they get delivered something that's subpar or semi-made up, but now the executive says, we want you to reproduce this. And so it gets reproduced, right? So
that's right.
And then I think there's a prediction component or prediction / roadmap.
Yeah.
Right. Like how do we do things? And then planning.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that kind of gets lost is status updates. Like I've been thinking a lot about like how many tools we use and how we use them. And it's crazy. Like we literally don't realize that probably in a given day, we probably touch 30 to 40 different tools.
Wow.
Like what's email for?
Yeah.
Like it's not, like, and where this stuff breaks down oftentimes is you see Excel being your reporting / analytics / workflow / everything tool because it's flexible.
Yeah.
And then you have email being the planning and notification. And yet the email, I don't think email was ever meant for that.
No. In that way, we're kind of like cavemen, right? We've got a stick and a rock and we use them to hunt and we use it for a pillow and, it's our toy and entertainment. And it's just, we don't have other alternatives. And you're right. I personally use email as really kind of my hub of communications and tracking.
Yeah.
Because it does have some of those fundamental things like reminders, but in any given day, I may use email and provide updates inside of a shared piece of software.
Yep.
And use Slack and text and then all the variety of meeting platforms that we use now.
Well, and one of the things to think about as you're thinking about process debt
Yeah.
is we are oftentimes being sucked into these like time suck warps.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you go into your email, are you focused? Oh no, it's just a distracting area of landmines.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you just got a text on your phone. Why am I playing Angry Birds now? Like, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's this really weird thing where it's like, where does the work live?
Yeah.
Like, where's my process? Where's my workflow? And the thing is like, we just don't talk about it. And so we all assume that we're right and we're all doing it differently, you know, and our core tenets of like, is it discoverable and is it transferable?
Right.
We actually don't know, but we believe it is. And that therein lies the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. For a country of less religious folks, we have a high degree of faith that things will magically happen,
Oh yeah.
you know? And when it comes to process, we take the handoff from person upstream and then we give it to the next person downstream and we walk away and said we did our job. But
Correct.
that's, you know, that's not a finished thing. We've gotten so expert, especially in larger organizations, that we rarely see a transaction tip to tail.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't know that we've talked on this, but I've been recently doing some work around real estate renovation for a client.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity to really see in a very physical way what happens when those handoffs break.
Yep.
You know, what happens if you don't get your permits or inspections, or what happens if the cement guy shows up and nobody's there to see him and get stuff poured? Like, so many places stuff breaks. But I think in our digital corporate world, there's not that same sense of urgency. We don't have the weather beating on us to keep us focused and on the timeline. And so things kind of drift, you know?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is like the just definition of done oftentimes is unclean. It's like, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things that we've talked about is like, what are you doing? Are you just drafting something up? Then just do a crappy video. Like and then we'll figure out if it's important.
Yeah.
Later.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, on this notion of, is there a RACI for software? Where should the technology be the system of record?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's that kind of accountable piece.
Yeah.
Where is it consulted? And so oftentimes we put process into technology, but then when we build out the access model, we strip out people that need to consult the very data we capture. And so now we've artificially separated them and made their lives harder. But then the informed piece too, you know, back to your point about reporting and analytics, they are not the same, you know?
Oh, it's interesting. Like I think it would, you know, not that you could do this, but like if every single report, you just simply had a stamp of this is a one-time analysis or this is repeatable.
Yeah.
And what you would find, I think what you would find is you would find that most processes are driven from a report down than versus a process up.
Yeah. You're talking hierarchically in the organization.
Something's missing in a report, and therefore we need to add this thing to the report.
Yeah.
And so then we manufacture that into our process. And the process is really good until they ignore the report, but the report lives on for decades.
Yeah.
And then, but that process either stops, there's entropy, or you get a who's on first type thing where it's like, I don't know who's doing the report. It just comes magically shows up in the spreadsheet. And they realize that data is stale from, 94 or something like that.
Chris, that we're coming up on the end of time. And so one of my favorite memes going around right now is a guy's girlfriend is losing her mind. And he comes to him and says, hey, I can't keep up with all the laundry. You know, the house is a mess. He's like, oh, wait, come here. Let me show you. And he walks her into the laundry room and he says, I just dumped my dirty laundry in this basket. And a day later, it shows up in my dresser and it's clean and folded. And you can see her like starting to boil. And he's like, come into the kitchen. I leave my crap all over, but when I walk away, it's cleaned up and it's back in the cupboards. And I think that people kind of expect process to work like that. If I ignore it long enough, somebody else will magically, the fairies will come in and they'll fix it. They'll put things back in the proper places. So
yes. And the closer you get to the root of whatever it is, it's just nuanced.
So nuanced.
And like, it takes so much, it takes so much of that slow thinking of like, why do we want this? How do we use this? Right. Which is why, like, anytime someone asks me about a report, I'm like, or creating specifically a new report. Like I had someone ask me today, they were like, hey, I need to create this report. And I was like, do it as simple and as easy as you can. And if it gets used, they will tell you if you want more information.
Yeah.
And then you will find that the information that you're providing is not that good. And so you're going to have to clean it up. But the reality is they're probably not going to want to clean it up.
Yeah.
And so it's significantly easier to ask for more and more reports and more metrics that you don't have to think about. And so in some ways it becomes this easy out for management.
Yeah.
It's really like, there's nothing more frustrating. And I like data, but there's nothing more frustrating than just grinding and like being asked to delivering data and have it be dismissed because the data doesn't match the confirmation bias that they want. So
yeah, that must be wrong because that's not what I thought.
There you go.
Hey, you know what? I think on our 24th session, we may have just created the longest.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. This podcast also not brought to you by the assholes at Fabletics.
That's correct. We do not like them. They're not our favorite. All right, dude. We will catch you next week, man.
It's a deal. All right.
All right. Thanks.